Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here and welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be creating this card, and this card was inspired by this card that was designed by design team member Amy. And the cards are very similar, but I did change a couple of things when I recreated the card for the video, so I just want to show you how to create it from start to finish. So these are the supplies we're going to be using. We have the Cloud Shaker Window and Frame, which is a new April release die. We have the Stitch Rainbow and the Hearts in a Row Vertical Die-namics, and then we also have the Aim for the Cloud stamp set, which is what we're going to use for the sentiment on the card. So the first thing I want to do is to create the background panel, and for this we're going to use some distress inks, and we're going to use them as a watercolor. So I want to work on the background first so that we can kind of let it dry as we work on other parts of the card. So this is a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch piece of watercolor paper. This is Ranger watercolor paper. And I have two little distress mini ink cubes here. I have cracked pistachio and I also have peacock feathers. And these are going to be the two colors that we're going to use on the background to create kind of like a gradient effect. So I have a cup here of some water, and I'm just going to use a flat paintbrush and I'm going to fully paint the panel with just plain water. I want it to be nice and wet before I start to add the ink so that that ink will move really nicely over the surface. So once I have that panel fully wet with water, I'm going to take the paintbrush and dip it into the two colors and paint the color onto this panel. So I'm doing the peacock feathers on the top of the panel and I'm doing the cracked pistachio at the bottom. And you can see here at first as we add this first layer that this is not very dark, it's very, very light. And that's because we've added the water to the paper, and then we also watered down the ink quite a bit with our paintbrush and water. So I am going to add one more layer of color while the panel is still wet. So I wiped up the ink that I had on my work surface just to kind of make sure I didn't mix the two colors together. I put some new ink down and then I repeated the same process and added another layer of color. And now we're just going to set this aside to dry and work on another part of the card. So for the Stitch Rainbow, when Amy created her card, she die cut all of the pieces of the rainbow from cardstock colors. And I decided for this variation we're going to use Copic markers, and I die cut one rainbow from white cardstock, and I'm just going to use my Copic markers to color each of the pieces of the rainbow with a different color. Doing it this way where we're adding the color to each of the pieces is really quick and easy, and it makes a really fast rainbow. But if you're going to do any type of mass producing for this card design, I definitely recommend doing it Amy's way and cutting it from cardstock. And that's because every time you cut the rainbow from the cardstock colors, you're going to get all 6 of the pieces in that same color. So if you cut it from 6 different cardstocks, you're going to be able to assemble 6 different rainbows with all of the different pieces. But since I'm only creating one card, I decided to do it this way where I just added the color to each of the individual pieces. So I started with my purple at the bottom of the rainbow, and then I just worked my way up with an aqua blue color, a green, a yellow, an orange, and then a pinky red color. And that is going to complete all the colors for our rainbow. So while we worked on the coloring for the rainbow, it allowed our background panel to completely dry. So now I'm going to go back in and add some more color to this. And that's the thing with watercolor is you can just kind of keep adding color as each of the layers dries, and that's going to intensify the color that you're going to end up with. And do keep in mind that anytime you do any type of watercolor background like this, it tends to look a little bit more vibrant when it's still wet. And when it completely dries, that color is going to mute down a bit and be a little bit lighter than what you started with. Okay, so I've let this panel completely dry, and we're going to do one more thing to it before we start to assemble the card. I'm going to get my craft mat and put that back onto my work surface just to kind of protect the area because I'm going to do some white paint on an acrylic block with some water. And I'm going to use a paintbrush and splatter that onto the background. I really love that Amy did this on her card and definitely wanted to recreate it on this one. So you have two options. You can do like I just did here where I kind of dipped the paintbrush and tapped it with my finger. But what I prefer to do is this method where I just take the paintbrush and kind of slide it off the end of the acrylic block and kind of give it a flicking motion. And that just gives you a really fine mist of splatter, and it's a little bit more controlled on where the paint is going to go. So once I was happy with the amount of paint on there, I set that aside to dry once again, and now we're going to work on the sentiment strip. So I have the Aim for the Cloud sentiment from the Aim for the Cloud stamp set that was also part of the April release, and I'm stamping it onto this little banner using Versamark ink. And this little banner piece was die cut with the Hearts in a Row Vertical Die-namics. I love that die set for being able to cut out a bunch of sentiment strips all at once. So I put some silver fine detail embossing powder onto that stamping, and then off screen I heat set that. So now I have a silver heat emboss sentiment on that strip that we can add to the card when it's finished. Now one more thing I want to do while that background panel is still drying is I want to take some tumbled glass distress ink, And I've went ahead and cut out the frame detail that's going to go around the clouds in the background panel. So this die set has two different dies. It has the window, which we're going to use in a bit here to die cut the openings for the clouds. And it also has these frame pieces, which you can use to layer around the cloud. So I've die cut them both from white cardstock, and I just used some tumbled glass distress ink and added a bit of color to the bottom of those just to help them blend a little bit more into the background. So now that I have that background panel dry, I'm going to go ahead and start to assemble the card. So I have all of the pieces already die cut. We have our rainbow that we colored with our Copic markers, and I'm going to add that to the background first. So I started with the largest piece, which is that reddish pink color, and I added that on first, and then all of the rest of the pieces just kind of fit into place, and you can quickly and easily assemble that entire rainbow. Once I have that fully adhered on there, I need to cut out the openings for our shaker clouds. So what I want to do here is I just want to make sure that when I'm die cutting the window opening, I'm leaving enough space at the bottom for the frame of the shaker cloud, which I have on screen there, to fit on that panel. So I just made sure before I die cut it that everything was going to fit where I was putting it, and that I would completely die cut over the end of the rainbow. You want to make sure that both ends of the rainbow completely go underneath of the cloud so it looks like it's going from one cloud to the other. So I die cut that first cloud, and then I put the frame in place just to give me spacing, and then I die cut the second cloud from the top area. And what I'm left with is two openings on this panel that go from one end of the rainbow to the other, and now we can turn those into the shaker pouches. So what I like to do to adhere the pouches to the openings is I like to take Scor-Tape on the back of the panel, and I just take it all the way around the opening. I just make sure that it's right against the edge of that window so that the little lip area on the shaker pouch is easily going to adhere to that panel. So once I had all of the Scor-Tape on there, I removed the backing pieces from it, and then I just put that shaker pouch right in that opening, and you can see how easily that kind of adhered to the panel. So I did that to the bottom, and now I'm just repeating the exact same process on the top. I did the same thing with the Scor-Tape, and now I'm just adding that shaker pouch inside of there. And you can see when I tilt it, we have these really fun clouds that have the shaker pouches in place and are ready to be filled with sequins. Now I have another cardstock piece there that's going to be the backer panel that we're going to use to close the sequins inside of the clouds. So I'm just taking some clear sequins. I have a big bowl of them since I use them quite often on my cards. And I'm just taking a handful and placing them into each of those clouds. You want to make sure when you add your sequins that you don't have too much in there that you're going to end up with some bulk. You want to make sure they fit nicely within the depth of the shaker pouch. And once you know that, you can go ahead and add that background panel on, which is going to adhere everything inside. And now I have these great big clouds on this card design, and they have these fun clear sequins on the inside, and then you can see the white cardstock behind them to give them the look of that white cloud. Now, if you prefer not to have the clouds so stark white in behind, you can definitely add some of that tumbled glass ink to those cloud pieces as well, and that will just kind of mute down the color a bit and not have them stand out as much. But I really wanted mine to be purely white in behind the sequins. And then to finish off those clouds, I just took the two frames that we had die cut and added that tumbled glass distress ink to, and I just added them around both of the clouds using the same liquid glue pen that I had used for the rainbow. So the last thing we need to do now is add the sentiment, and I spaced my clouds a little bit differently than Amy did on her card, so my sentiment kind of overlapped one of the frames on the bottom cloud, and I was okay with that. I kind of like the look of the white sentiment strip kind of overlapping that white frame. And then I also decided to add a few clear sequins around the outside of those clouds as well, and that is going to complete our card. So thank you so much to Amy for creating this fun shaker cloud design that we were able to recreate in today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you being here, and I hope to see you in another video soon.